times hard, like you've got a winning hand until you got the wrong card. It ain't fair, but you're not alone. You're down and out and you're high and dry, and the darkest valley or the coldest night. You're fine, you're not alone. With a song bubbling in your heart, where a story can give you a brand new start. You don't have to travel this big bad world all on your own, 'cause it's better when we do it together. All mixed up and upside down, feels like there's no one else around. That ain't right, 'cause you're not alone. It all goes south and life gets tough. When you've been knocked down and the weeds are rough, you just fight, 'cause you're not alone. No, with a soul bubbling in your soul, where a story can make you feel whole. You don't have to travel this big bad world all on your own, 'cause it's better when we do it together. Yeah, it's better when we do it together. Yeah. I just lost 10 people singing that song. I love that. Hey everybody, welcome to the Polaha Chautauqua. It is Kristoffer Polaha, and you're joining me live today. And I'm trying to do this weird mix of tone in our show, because today is the second episode of Grief, and I wanted to talk to you guys. And over the course of the week, I have received so many messages on my DMs and on the contact at Chris Polaha, and people who have lost their kids and their moms and their dads and their husbands and their wives, and people whose stories of grief are, it's heavy. It's heavy. And at the same time, it's a really fun day today. If you've been watching Hallmark, which most of you have, there's been a marathon of Mystery 101. Tonight we have an all-new killer timing that's right on after this live. So it's a weird show, but I wanted to talk to you guys, and I wanted to finish up on grief today. And one of the things that was so beautiful about last week's episode was that it was a chance for people to just come on and talk. And I know that it was interesting, because I asked Julianne afterwards, and you were so sweet about her and her vulnerability and her jumping on and talking about it. And there we go. They're all back. All the people that left during my song are back. I asked her how it was, and she was like, it was really weird. She's like, it just felt like I never got to articulate the things that I was feeling, and it just didn't feel enough. And I think that, Sam came on last week, and there were some beautiful people who came on and shared, and their story of grief, to encapsulate it and to do it in a public forum like this, it's an odd feeling, because what you're doing is you're turning real things that have profound impact on your life, and you're turning them into a story. But one of the points of the Chautauqua is that we are all defined by the stories that we tell. And we are defined by the stories that we believe in. You know what I mean? It's this, you believe that a guy rose from the dead 3 days after he was died, and then because of that, you believe you have salvation, and because of that, you believe that you're going to go to heaven for eternity and live with a God who loves you and who created you out of dust and stardust. That's a story that we believe in, that gives us faith and hope and allows us, it might set a nice tone for us. Hi, Gail.
Hey, Kristoffer.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good today. I'm doing real good. I wanted to start with you today because I think that you'll probably have some nice things to say about grief that can set the tone and help us launch into the hour.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank Julianne and everyone else who shared last week because it was really beautiful. And I thought a lot about it this week. And there's a verse in the Bible, two verses, in 2 Corinthians, chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. And it says, "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort." That's one of my favorite descriptions of God, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. And it goes on to say that he comforts us in all our troubles. And catch this, so that we can comfort those in trouble with the comfort that we received from God.
Right.
And so those verses tell me two really important things. First of all, they tell me that God is the source of comfort. He is the God of all comfort. And that's important when we want to, we're looking for comfort. We know that we can go to him. But the second thing that it tells me is it tells me that once we've gotten to a certain point in our healing, we need to look around and see who else is hurting and help them. I can't tell you how many times I've walked through a dark season myself, and then weeks later, months later, maybe even years later, I find myself in a place with someone who was going through the exact same thing that I went through.
Right.
And I was then able to walk alongside them to help them through it. And sometimes it even got to the point where I thought, wow, now I know why I went through that. You know, I would question, why, Lord? Why am I going through this? And then I would see he was using me. He was refining me. He was getting me ready for that next assignment.
That's right.
So I do think it's important. And when I said you get healed, you know, you reach a certain point of healing, that doesn't mean that you don't still miss the person. It doesn't mean that you've forgotten about them. It just means that you have, whether it be through prayer or a combination of, you know, prayer and counseling and all kinds of things, time and all that, you've gotten to a point where you've moved from the rawness of it all to where you're rebuilding and you're remembering. Doesn't mean you've forgotten. Doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt.
No, not at all.
Doesn't mean there aren't still little triggers and pricks and things.
In fact, to keep it to the storytelling thing, I think it's at that moment when you can start shaping the narrative. When you stop experiencing it, it's like going through a blast, right?
Yeah.
Like I was in this explosion, and I remember all the things that led up to it. I remember the building. I remember the fireball that I was engulfed in. This little pizza thing that flew in front of me. I remember the experience all the way up to being in the hospital and the stitches and all the things. And that was traumatic. That's the trauma and that's the experience. And then there was the aftermath of that experience. But then all of a sudden you can turn and look at it. I still had healing to do and I was still emotionally, but you turn and look at it and you start putting all the pieces together. And that's and that's when you start telling the story. And what you were talking about, which is exactly the power of storytelling. It's like when you can share an experience that happened to you, and oftentimes it's usually the darkest and the hardest things to talk about that become the most healing, because the hardest, darkest things to talk about are usually, you know, filled with shame or hurt or pain or things that people don't want to go into.
Right.
A lot of times death is nervous and scary for the exact reason that we just don't know. And as Christians, we have faith and we have hope and we have this idea of what it would look like. My son and I, we were talking about what heaven would be like. Specifically, last night we were we were sitting out there for 2 hours talking, and we were talking about his grandfather, his granddaddy, and I said, do you wonder, like, you know, because Sam had said that her dad was in crows, and they had talked about crows, and then a crow landed on the hood of a car. And I said, but wouldn't it make sense if in death we can then become a part of everything, that we are still who we were, but at the same time, if I wanted to get into a crow and see what that is like, or if I was, you know, and I don't know that I can manipulate what it's like to be, I don't know, like, and that's the whole point. Like, you just start talking about what is it afterwards. And the Bible tells us that there are streets paved with gold and that there's no more sorrow and no more pain. But what does that mean? And one of the things I've always thought about was in regards to heaven and hell. And because of this conversation about like when people say, well, you know, you're telling me that if I'm not a Christian, I'm going to go to hell. I'm like, hold on a second. I'm not the judge of anybody. I don't know
Right.
who's going to heaven or hell. But what if when you die, you meet God? And I don't even know what that means other than knowing what his love feels like. And either
Mhm.
you absorbed into that and you're brought
Mhm.
into that because you've known it and you've worked towards it your whole life, or you've rejected it your whole life. And in death, there's this knowing that it's real, and then it's like the absence of that feeling, which I would imagine would be a feeling of like, that would be hell, knowing that there's this thing out there that you're not a part of. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation that has nothing to do with
Yes, it
grief
is.
we can get into one day. But it's
Yeah.
this idea of what happens afterwards. And I think it's the
Mhm.
unknown that makes us so scared and makes us painful. Sam also, she really had a big impact this week on me. She posted something that grief is love, sort of turned on its head. Like we grieve and is an act of loving the person who's lost. And so I think
Mhm.
a lot of times people have a hard time letting go of grief because in a
Mhm.
weird way they feel like, well, once I let go of my grief, I'm no longer actively loving that person that I miss so much. And
Right.
that's interesting, you know, to think about.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that the love is there. It just means your ability to project that love has been changed.
Worded,
And
yeah.
I know we're primarily talking about grieving the loss of a person, specifically a loved one, but you can grieve a lot of different things. You can grieve the loss of a career. You can grieve the loss of a dream. There are a lot of things in life that we can grieve, and each one of them we grieve differently depending upon the type of grief it is, the type of situation it was. But I think the important thing is just to know that it is a process, and there's no right way to grieve. There's no book that says you have to get through these 5 steps in this amount of time. It's not like that.
Right, right.
It's different for every person. It's different for every person depending upon the type of grief. The point is that there is a source of comfort out there. His name is God, and he loves you, and he's the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, and he will help you in his time. And it may not be in the time frame you would like. It may not even be in the time frame that your spouse would like.
Mm-hmm.
You talked last week about when Julianne was
Yeah,
hurting, and
yeah.
it
When
was
I
it
was
was
going
hard
to
for
bed.
you to get on the same page, right?
Yeah.
And that happens. But just having the hope that you can get through that point, and understanding that when you get through that point, please help someone else. And I do want to say one more thing, because I don't know if you're getting ready to jump to someone else, but a few years back I was trained as a Stephen minister, and that's
Oh,
a
you were?
para it's a para
Yeah.
ministry work where you walk through a season of grief with somebody, whatever they're grieving or whatever kind of affliction they may have. And the one thing I learned, a lot of things, but the most important thing I learned in being trained to be a Stephen minister was the importance of listening actively, being present in the moment. When I'm listening to you, I'm looking at you, and I'm not thinking about my retort. I'm not thinking about what else I'd like to say. I'm listening to what you're saying. And it's important to be an active listener. God gave us 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. We are to use them in that proportion.
In that proportion. Yeah, I love that.
Yes,
Yeah,
we are to listen twice as much as we talk.
yeah.
So when you are walking along someone who is grieving, just listen. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to worry about saying the right thing. Just listen. They're not going to remember what you said, but they're going to remember that you sat there with them and you held their hand. They're going to remember that you cried on the phone with them,
Yeah.
that you mourned with them. Just listen. Just listen and be present, and don't worry about being the person to comfort them, because
Right.
you're never going to comfort them.
Or if
God
you're a
is going to.
husband, right? If you're a husband watching this, like the guy that fixes it, like there's no fixing in
Mhm.
grief. And Julianne
Well,
would say, she's like, I just want you to hug me. Like, I just want you to be here
that's
for me
right.
to, cry on and hug. And I always felt like
Mhm.
I want to fix it. I want to be able to fix it and take away the pain, and you can't.
Mhm.
You
No,
know?
you can't. You
Um,
can't.
it's funny. I was grieving this week something, and this morning I woke up just you know, bluer than blue, like one of those awful dreams. And I woke up with the awful dream, and you wake up with the feeling all on you. And I was in the shower, and I was really just genuinely like, it was that awful feeling that you get. And the only thing in my life that immediately snaps me out of it is I just prayed. And I was just like,
Mhm.
Jesus, take it from me right now. Like the thing I'm
That's right.
grieving for, you brought that into my life. And
Mhm.
that's the thing I think that we have to always remember. The people in our lives, they're given to us, they're gifts, and we didn't ask for them, and we can't control when they come into our lives. We can't control when they leave our lives. The same thing with the other things like our jobs or marriages or
Mhm.
things that we can grieve. A lot of
Mhm.
these things are gifts to us that we have really no control over. Even if we think
Right.
we do, even if we think it's a career that we've built,
Mhm.
all of those things are given to us at some measure because of,
Mhm.
because God is, yeah, there's a lot to, and it starts to unpack this conversation, that of God, that and grief, and, you know,
Mhm.
because it does feel personal. And I think people do feel like, well, why is this happening to me? Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it gets loaded, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And be encouraged, someone who is grieving, you aren't grieving alone. You're
Right.
not the first to ever grieve. You won't be the last. And I know that sounds a little flippant. I don't mean for it to. I'm just trying to say it in a way that encourages you to understand that others have suffered through things. And
Well,
yes, it's taken time, but if God has brought them comfort, he is faithful to bring you comfort. It might not look in the same way, might not come in the same manner,
yeah.
but he is faithful to bring that comfort to your heart.
Yeah, and to go back to your original point about God using our grief to comfort others, again, it becomes a singular, unique, the way that I experience grief and the way that my wife experienced her grief, like she's going to be able to minister to people that I can't minister to, and I'm going to be able to minister to people that she can't minister to because of
That's
that
right.
uniqueness and all that stuff.
Mhm.
All right, Gail, I'm gonna let people come on and share their stories, because I do think that there's some catharsis in publicly talking and telling your story, and when you shape it and get it out there, it takes a little bit of the edge off, which I think is a healthy step to move forward. So, um,
Absolutely.
I guess you're going to have to X out on me, but it's
Okay.
always lovely to see you, Gail.
You too. Bye.
Appreciate you.
You too.
Here we go. All right. Now, let's see who we got. Yeah, this whole group here today. Okay. Um, let's start with, man, every time I say her name, I get nervous. Jama, I think. Jama.
Hi,
Is it Jama?
it's Jama.
Yeah,
Yes.
got it right. Hey, Jama, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. So I know that you have a story about grief, and I know that it's a fresh one. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to come on today and talk, because I know that there was a lot of gratitude wrapped up in, but I'm going to wipe the slate clean, because I know that you were keeping a journal, and I know that there were 46 spaces free, and that 46 people, that there were names that
Hi.
filled spaces. And but I also just want you to talk and tell your story. So could you catch people up who may not know your story and who you are and the whole thing?
Sure. So, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. Well, it was reoccurring. So it came back in December with a vengeance, and she also had dementia. And so, there were some blessings in the situation as well, just because the dementia is such a cruel disease. But um, she was hospitalized, and we had hoped that she would, make it through radiation, but she ended up going to hospice. And so I do keep a gratitude journal, and I'd been journaling until we admitted her into the hospital. And so for the 2 weeks that she was in the hospital, I didn't journal. And so she moved to hospice, and I remember being very angry. And kind of like Gail said, there's so many different types of grief. You go through all these stages, right? And so I was just really angry at the situation, even though I'd been praying for peace for her mind and her body. And I hadn't been writing in my journal, but I had been writing down the names of all the doctors, the nurses, the CNAs, the housekeepers. Everyone was so kind to us. So I had, for whatever reason, I make notes in my phone, quotes. I collect quotes. So I just have like these 2 lists, right? And so this night nurse, Cheryl, came in and she was so kind, and she was explaining the process of dying, which is hard to hear, but also so helpful. And I thought she really took the time to grieve with us. I need to put her name in my phone. So I went to do that. And right under my phone was the gratitude journal. And I was like, God, what am I going to do? Like, I'm so angry right now. But I had those names, and I had the exact number of names as I had spaces. And I was like, okay, God, you've been with me all along. These people that are strangers have been the hands and feet of Jesus, not only to my mom, but to us. Yeah. And it was just really cool. And I love that we're talking about this on the heels of gratitude, because they can coexist. You know, it's hard to see, it's really hard to see sometimes. And I still have moments. It's fresh. She passed away last month. My sweet dad lives down the street, so I have lunches with him, and we find humor. I mean, that's just how we grieve, is through funny stories, and something will happen and we'll say, oh, Mom would totally react this way, you know. We look at old photos, and so that's been really helpful. I do appreciate Julianne and her transparency, because we had just said the other day, like, if we could just talk to her. We want to know what heaven's like. We ordered that book, Imagine Heaven.
You did,
and
yeah.
It's so cool. We've been kind of reading it together when we're with each other, and it's been really encouraging and hopeful. You know, as people of faith, we know that there's hope when we pass, but it's still, like you said, that
Still mystery, yeah.
we have no idea.
Yeah.
And so that has given us some peace. And I would say, too, the power of other people's prayers. You know, I've been through other types of grief, like Gail said, the loss, just disappointments. And to have other people praying on my behalf, I have felt that later on. Yeah. So anyway.
Which is also really cool, I think, for people to hear, because I think when we're young, we get trained in our hearts. Because we're children, we pray for us. We pray for our stuff.
Right.
And then as you grow older and you mature in your faith, when you start praying for other people, that becomes this profound blessing, not only to them, but also to your own heart. I mean,
absolutely,
it's a big deal. Like, the difference between praying for yourself and praying for other people becomes night and day in how you move through the world. So you really grieved your mom before she passed, because they call dementia the long goodbye, and it's
right. And she slowly, like, she knew who I was, but she was an educator for 25 years, and so she couldn't, like, write her own name, you know. So we slowly grieved her for the past 10 years. And so in many ways, when we prayed for peace, I mean, God answered that prayer. He just didn't answer it the way we wanted.
Yeah. How's your dad doing? Is he okay being by himself now?
You're so sweet to ask. He's like, I'm kind of in shock. I just keep waiting for her to walk around the corner. And as a caregiver, I mean, that man is golden. He did everything for her. And he would say, oh, it's an honor, you know, to take care of her. And truly, you know, people get married for the better, the richer, and the health. But the sickness and the poor and the worst comes, it just looks different for people. But he has really modeled what unconditional love looks like. And that has been a gift. That's been something that I've witnessed and watched. So now he's got all this time. And with COVID, you know, he's still not getting out very much. So we try to go see him. But he's doing okay. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. My wife is here. She's sitting over here. She's off camera today.
Hi. Yeah. No. Yes. My mother is suffering with memory loss, and I say memory loss because it's so hard for me to acknowledge anything more deeper than that, even though it is. It really flared up right after my dad passed. It seemed like it went into overdrive, and so dementia is it's like this really slow grief. It's a slow process of grief, and it's terrible. And so I know that you know that she's at peace now, but I'm sure that was really hard, and I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, I'm sorry you're experiencing that too. And that, and, that's a kind of grief as well. It's not death,
Yeah.
but it's such a cruel, slow process. I'm so sorry.
She doesn't know who I am anymore, so
No,
she'll always be like, she'll be like, who is that
So
guy?
here's a funny little story that's very, very sweet, and I'm going to stay off camera, but y'all can hear my voice. So my mom and Chris have always loved each other, but they've always kind of been that typical son-in-law and mother-in-law relationship that's, not rocky, but, not perfectly
It's her baby
smooth.
girl, like
Yeah.
Not perfectly smooth, always a little like, what's he up to? Who is this fella? However, listen, I could cry, but instead of cry, I try to find the silver lining. But now she's very enamored with Chris. And she, the other day, Chris was walking by and she said to my sons, who is that? And my boy said, oh, well, that's your daughter's husband. And she goes, oh, well, there goes that.
it's a little, yeah. Like I'll be in the kitchen, she stare at me, and I'll be like, it's a little uncomfortable at this point. And then I'll leave and be like, who is that? And they're like, that's your son-in-law. That's your wife.
She's very enamored, and she thinks he's quite handsome now. And look, I could break into tears about it and just be and I do at times. Sometimes her being enamored with Chris is very heartwarming and feels good, and then other days I feel like I'm just crumbling to the ground and crying because it says there's more to it. It's it's
funny, but it's not.
It's right.
Laugh or cry.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But yes, there's all different types of forms of grief, and that's certainly another form of grief.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
I know how hard that is. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Jayma, I'm so happy that you were able to come back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Beautiful story on gratitude was the one in the episode that got lost to the ether.
Okay, it's right here.
There it is here.
It's right here.
Now it's, and the whole world gets it. So I'm going to ask you to X out on me, but thank you for jumping on today.
Thanks for having me. Y'all take care.
Bye, Jayma.
Bye.
Okay. Let's keep on trucking, folks. Libby, I'd love to hear what you got to say about grief. Hi, Libby.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking.
I love the hair, by the way. I should keep rocking it. I think it looks good.
Thank you. It's it is what it is. I've gotten a lot of compliments about it, which is lovely considering I can't dye my hair anymore. So I'm happy.
Compliments about it.
I have been. It's nice. I just wanted to talk about different kinds of grief that I discovered. My brother died of cancer at the age of 32, quite a while ago. And it's a very odd situation to be in. He only lasted 6 months after he was diagnosed. And it's very strange to find yourself going to sleep every night praying that your brother will die because he was in such pain and everything. And so when he finally did pass away, I was surprised to find that I was grieving, but I was also angry. And I realized that grief was not for my loss. It was for his loss. And I was angry that he wasn't going to get to have a full life and so many things he was going to miss out on because he died so young. And what helped me was I did a show not too long after he passed away. And I sang a song in the show and dedicated it to him. And doing that every night sort of helped me cathartically get through that. And then jump ahead years later, my mother, and I heard Jayma and Julianne, my mother also had dementia.
Sorry.
And thank you. And I was her caregiver for the last 7 years of her life. But physically, she was pretty good. We had a nurse that would come by and her vitals were really good. And then one night we were in the room and the nurse was giving her a shot and I rolled her over on her side and I just hugged her and I looked at her. I said, I got you, honey. I got you. And boom, at that moment, it turns out she had probably a stroke or an aneurysm, and she was gone. And I grieved for that, even though, like you said, I had been preparing for this, I thought, because of her dementia.
Yeah.
But the grief was so deep, and I realized at that point that that grief was about me. I was grieving my loss. Unlike my brother, I was grieving his loss of the life he wasn't going to have. With my mother, I was grieving my loss because I wasn't ready to let go of her. And I wasn't prepared for that to happen at that moment, that night. And so that, I'm sorry, that really, and it's been almost 7 years now, and I can still see every moment and so for me, it's almost been harder to get over that grief because it's my loss that I'm grieving.
Right.
And so I mean, I don't know if any of that made any sense, but
No,
just
It made
so much sense.
It made great sense.
And what it made me think about was like the idea that we give this word grief to we put a word to this concept of permanence. Like our world changes.
right.
Fabric of our reality changes in the wake of the absence of these people that we love.
Right.
You've got a visitor.
Yeah, well, they can keep ringing. I'm not going to the door. I'm talking to Chris and Julianne. I'm not going to the door.
but it's that was the cosmic situation point of the conversation. I love it. But it's yeah, I don't know, just this idea of permanence. Like we hit, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for your brother.
Thank you.
That changes. It changes your life.
And my brother was, like I said, he was he needed to go.
Do you want to see who it is? Do you want to take
Okay.
us?
All right. This
Let's
could be
go.
very. Let's
go.
hope it's not something embarrassing.
What if it's if Libby
Right?
has a stripper?
I know. Yeah, that'll happen. I'm on the phone. I'll call you. Okay. That was my neighbor.
Okay.
But yeah, my brother, like I said, I was going to sleep every night saying, please go, please. Because he was in such pain. And I remember, oddly enough, because he had moved in with my mom. So he was at my mom's house when he passed away. So when mom called me to say that he had passed away, and I went over there, because of his lung cancer for the last 2 months of his life, he couldn't lay down. He had to sit up 24 hours a day because he couldn't breathe if he laid down. And when I walked into the room and saw him, the first thing I thought in my head was, this is the first time I've seen him laying down in 2 months. And, but again, he was so full of tumors and so full of that it was like, well, I mean, it's so trite to say, but it was like a blessing
because there was nothing to be done. It sounds like
right.
This was happening, and it was about.
And so my grief, as I said, my grief was for him because I just thought it was so unfair.
Right.
At 32, and he never had a family. He all the things he was going to miss, and all of that was what I was grieving. I think I was. That's what I was, and the fact that he had to go through that. But like I said, with my mom, it was I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for her to go, and so I think that may also be why. Like I said, I think that may be also why that grief is still with me quite a bit.
I'm not the most articulate human being on the planet, but what I do know is that when you turned your brother's life into song,
yeah,
you were able to sing to people and bring him up in your memories. And I love the idea of people. That's why we talk about the ones that we love. That's why we talk about the people that we love.
Right. And it was a wonderful song written by Irving Berlin, and it's called My Buddy. And so I would do that song every night and say, this is for my brother, Don, who I had talked about in other shows, not him being sick, but we had moved out to LA together. So I had, I had talked about him in other shows. So the people who came to my show, a lot of them knew my brother through my shows. And so I think it was cathartic for me. I do.
How does it go? The song?
Nights are long since you went away. I think about you all through the day. My buddy, my buddy, nobody quite so true. Miss your voice, the touch of your hand. I long to know that you'll understand, my buddy, your buddy misses you. It's, and it really helped me, I think, doing that every night. And I think you're right. I think that may have sort of unconsciously been a way to exorcise what I was feeling about him.
Where do you live now? Where are you?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh man, that's my wife's. She wants to go to Georgia or Tennessee or
Southeast.
Somewhere in the Southeast. So
there you go. Well, I'm a native. There are not many natives of Atlanta left, but I'm a native, and
we'll be a part of the problem. When we move, it'll be like
there you go.
More Californians. All right, Libby. What a blessing to hear your heart tonight. Thank you for sharing your stories and
thank you.
Gift and thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm going to X you out. Don't take it personal.
I won't. I never did.
Bye-bye.
So long. Okay. Let's see what else we got. All right. I'm going to go to Jamie. Jamie, I'm coming at you. You're all watching. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Hang on. Let me get connected here.
All right.
Oh, come on. Now don't do this to me. How embarrassing.
It's like being caught without your Wi-Fi.
I've been caught. Oh man. If for some reason this doesn't work, can I here I am. Hey.
Let's see. There you go. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, I am well. Thank you for accepting my, a lot of times I don't get to watch, and I tell you, when I do, my heart is just always so full, and I just feel like I'm about to bust, and I'm just so happy to chime in. Hey.
I love
it.
Yeah. Well, do you have a story that you want to contribute regarding grief, or is there something you want to say on the subject?
Well, you and I have chatted before about, I think I had sent you a message about doing something on grief.
That was you.
That's me. That's Jamie.
You.
Yeah.
So I was looking for you, and I lost your DM in a sea of DMs. And once it's out, 3 days out, they're impossible to find. So you deal in grief. Isn't that weird how the world, the universe, I have to just say God because it's clearly, but I think that you obviously were intended to be here today. So talk to me about what you do regarding grief.
Okay. I work for, it's Arkansas Hospice in Little Rock, Arkansas, and there are several hospices, but I'm what's known as a bereavement specialist. And even as I say that, let me do a disclaimer that I don't think anybody can be a specialist or an expert in anyone else's grief. We can't even be an expert in our own grief, much less anybody else's. But what that means is that, hospice is one of the things that we do after the patient dies is we provide a year of support to the families. And every hospice does that. It's what's called a condition of participation, that we provide a year of grief support to these families. And that can be in a lot of different ways. It can be support groups, which these days means telegrief, right? And we're doing a lot of that. But it's phone calls. It used to mean in-person support, support groups, all of that. But our whole goal is to companion people in the way that is going to be most meaningful for them on their journey. And as I've been sitting here and listening to, talking about grieving the loss of someone before they're gone, and, the terms, because grief has its own language, right? And I believe that grief is really a conversation about love, because when we love deeply, we grieve deeply. And so our role as bereavement specialists is in grief support, is that we meet people where they are with what they need. And some people don't need anything. They just need to know that we're thinking about them. Some people say, hey, I'm good, thanks. And I'll get a phone call 3 months later that says, you said I could call if I needed anything. Because those early days of grief, as we know, are raw and tender and confusing. And a lot of times it's a month or two down the road when after what I call the 3 C's, the cards, the calls, the casseroles, especially in the South, because we're all about hospitality. After all of that has happened and other people have kind of turned their corner back to their lives, and because we do live in a grieve and get over it world, and sometimes I'll get a phone call and somebody has been going through their mother's jewelry, or for me, it was going through a coat and finding my mother's tissues, Kleenexes, because she had them everywhere. So a lot of times it's those little things that trigger that needing to talk with someone. A lot of times they want to talk with someone that's not directly involved, or they feel like they don't want to worry their kids anymore, or there's so many reasons why people need the support of an objective person, of someone whose whole goal is to hear your story as many times as you need to tell it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and people, they have trouble with that concept sometimes, because again, we live in a world that has not educated us well on grief, that has not supported the grief journey. And so a lot of what we do too is not only letting people know that we're there for their story, but affirming that, okay, I talked to my husband at night. Is that crazy? No. To me, there are the words like crazy and weird and strange. They don't have any place in the grief language.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's just knowing that it's okay. It's okay that their shoes are still by the door. It's okay that you haven't cleaned out the clothes yet. It's okay that you go to the graveside every day. It's okay, whatever it is, just being affirmed in whatever your grief journey is. Because, as we know, it's not linear. Grief is giving a toddler a crayon and telling them to go scribble on the wall. That's what grief is.
Right.
So that's what I do, and the amazing people that I work with in the same field is our whole goal. Yeah.
What is the wildest expression of grief that you've ever been witness to?
That I've ever been witness to?
Yeah.
Probably my own, honestly.
Yeah.
When my sister died at the age of 51, 13 years ago, I remember, oh my gosh, so many things, but I remember that I laid on the floor. All of a sudden I'm grammatically worried about being grammatically correct. I was in the floor on, in a fetal position, and I was just keening like an animal, just, and I've talked with a lot of people, and they do a lot of things that in their mind are extreme. But I remember thinking, rocking back and forth, just she was my best friend.
Yeah.
And 51 is
young,
a really, really young age to die. And I just was like an animal. I mean, I was wounded I was howling like an animal, because I did not know what to do with my pain. Working in the field had nothing to do with the pain that I was in. And it's like I couldn't even stay in my own skin, is what it felt like. and I had a daughter. I still have a daughter, but my daughter at the time, I mean, and she was afraid of that and she didn't understand that. And I remember, explaining that relationship, that when you can't even stay in your own skin because you're in so much pain. But what came out of that, and of course I have a million metaphors because I use metaphor a lot because it helps us make sense of things that don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
I remember thinking, I have to find a purpose in this. I have to find a purpose in this or I will not survive it.
Wow. Yeah.
I will not survive it. And so I used it in the work that I do. I kind of brought it in.
Had you been a bereavement specialist before your sister passed away, or did it sort of mutate?
I wasn't a bereavement specialist. I've worked in the field of end of life for about 20 years. I worked in the field of organ, tissue, and eye donation up until 2014, and then I switched over to hospice care because after 10 years of being on call nights and holidays and weekends, I was, kind of, and it's an amazing field, and what donor families do, and it's just there's nothing like it. But I switched over to doing something different. So, but I've worked in the field a long time, and I knew that I would have to find a purpose in it. I would have to find a way to use it, weave it into myself, make it part of my story, because I say it all the time, the story is everything. And there's an African proverb that says, as long as you say my name, I'll live forever. And I knew that I had, and that's what I preach. It's like, keep saying their name. The relationship doesn't end. The bond continues in a million ways. I wear my mother's apron when I cook. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
well, in so many cultures, like Dios de los Muertos, and in Egypt, like the reason why and I did a deep dive on grief culturally.
yeah,
there are so many civilizations, and then also just cultures where they'll hire people to come in and do that keening, where women will wail at the top of their lungs because people need to hear that, and I think it's our most animal self, like we have these extremes. It's like women get to give birth, people
that's right.
make love to each other, and then when we grieve, there's just this.
I would remember I would get in the car, and I still actually I do it from time to time. I would get in the car by myself because there's literally, you're locked in there and no one can hear you, and it's me in the car. And I was just reading one of these things. Someone said they feel like they couldn't breathe, and I remember driving and feeling like I can't breathe and just screaming over and over again at the top of my lungs and just crying out, begging him, to I don't know, just begging. I don't know what I was begging for, but just it was just wailing. And
that's right.
The car was always so wonderful because I never had to worry about somebody walking in the room, or I could kind of, I was by myself. And but that whole feeling of crying out and screaming, and that whole feeling of not being able to breathe, literally not being able to breathe, feeling like your heart is just going to stop. It's overwhelming what happens to your body and your mind in the midst of deep, deep grief. It's the most bizarre thing that you just feel so overcome with so much.
This was a blessing that you were here today, because when you sent me your DM, that was last year.
It was
that
late,
was
I guess, ago. Last fall or something. But
it was last fall.
If you would ever want, like an official chat, because obviously this is not the official chat phase, but
but it got me thinking. You're really the reason why I was like, we'll dedicate, some time to grief, because I think it's important, because I do think people, especially, like last week, those 8 people that were shot and killed, I think that as a country, I said last week too, we have 2.6 million people that died last year of COVID. Right. And I think we are animals. We are beautiful collective that when we are tapped into each other and loving each other in the right way, we are empathetic and we are sensitive to one another, and we're feeling each other. And so when there is a loss of one of us, it trickles through.
It does. And that's
grief is the healthy expression of that pain. We go, and we have to get it out.
Well, we do. And that's such a good point, because when I talk to these people, because a lot of people are afraid of it, and that they're going to be overwhelmed by it, and the one thing I say is, there's a purpose there's a reason for the grief process. And it's like anything that we don't allow. I talk about analogies and metaphors. I'll say it's like a stomach bug. Nobody likes to throw up, but we feel better when we do. And grief is like that. If we don't allow the beautiful process, the unveiling, the unfurling, whatever you want to call it, if we don't allow that, it's going to come out somehow weird and toxic and sideways. And so allowing this process that is just as natural to us as breathing, like your wife said, that when we do that, we create a sacred space for one another. When our compassion and our hearts and are open to what other people are experiencing, when we send out that loving energy because there's nothing that we can do other than send that. We can protest and things like that, but sending out the good intentions and the compassion and the love, and just recognizing that we are all standing on holy ground.
Yeah,
we are.
And it's fleeting, and to do it, some of the greatest moments of this, people come and they just lay a hand on me, and they'll just not say anything, but knowing that I've got people there who are loving on me and praying for me or whatever. And it's like, I've been brought to tears before by silence.
That's when the magic happens.
That's
when the magic happens. And
thank you so much for sharing your time with me tonight.
Of course.
For answering the call and for starting this conversation. Honestly, it's not hyperbole. When you DM'd me, I was like, that'd be great. And I was searching for your DM, and I can't remember everybody's, obviously. And so it was gone. So it was a real cool little happy.
Today was the day.
Right. It was the day.
See ya.
There's an X in the top corner. Will you click that for me? All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We've got time for one more guest on the Polaha Chautauqua. That's the takeaway, is just how much love can you give? Well, let's go, Allie. Hi, Allie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I love that you're like, hold on, I got to go to the back room.
Ben, no. Sorry. I have a circus in my house, so.
That's all right.
Have to get somewhere quiet.
That's fine. Do you have a story but you want to share?
I watched last week's kind of on the replay because we were driving home from visiting family, and it just made me think of how beautiful everybody's stories was. So I wanted to say thank you for everybody sharing. Please I'm so sorry. My circus is
Hey, what's up, guys?
Say hi. Hi.
How are you guys?
Sorry, I know we don't have a long time. Okay, out.
But see, I think it's kind of a perfect ending to the two-part grief.
Out. Yes, right?
Mine
has to do with this
too. Love and energy of family, because life goes on. I mean, it really does.
We're the Polaha family circus.
Yeah.
I like that, but it makes so much sense since having kids. So mine starts from 7 years ago. My husband and I got married, and we were lucky enough to get pregnant quickly, but we lost Ben. We lost the baby very early on. And I was kind of the last of my friend group to get married. And so everybody had already started the process of having their families start. And so I was really sad, obviously. And I had never experienced that, nor had anybody in my family. So I didn't think it would be something that I was going to experience. And so I had nobody to relate to. Nobody had gone through it.
Yeah.
They all just had an easy time and beautiful babies. And then a couple years later, after many doctors and specialists and acupuncture and blah, 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 we went to fertility specialists and we did what we needed to do. And we got pregnant, and it was so exciting. And then we actually ended up losing that baby too. And so, again, a huge disappointment. Years and years and years, I felt like were quote unquote wasted in trying to figure out what was going on fast forward another couple years, get pregnant, scared out of my mind because it had never worked before.
Right.
So we were nervous. We made it kind of through, went to the doctors often, and I was lucky enough to have this beautiful angel who's banging on the door right now.
I love this. It's like watching the Titanic. It's not because it's chaos and there's a sinking ship, but we just know how the story ends. You got this little guy who's not,
little beautiful,
like, Mom, come back.
3.5-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And then we went through back to our fertility specialist just to kind of make sure. Get away, please. To make sure everything was still good. And that's when I got pregnant with our triplets. So in this whole...
isn't that wild? Like, it's like,
wild.
I mean, you got them all back in a weird way.
I did. And that was how I thought about it. It's like, because I grieved so much once I had my son, because I knew like how beautiful it was. And that I lost 2 of those before, it made me like extra sad to think about what they would have been or how they could have been. But then I wouldn't have had this beautiful angel or the 3 subsequent ones. So what I found in grief is that like it in my time wasn't the time that I wanted it. Like God's time wasn't in my time. And
right.
All, like you said, when you kind of have those days where it's like all you can do is pray, because that's all that's going to get you through it. Right. There's no words from a friend as dear as they want to be. Like, right. There's nothing that can help you except for listening to what God has planned for you.
It's also interesting that you said you felt so alone in that. And something my wife had said, she experienced, we experienced 2 miscarriages, and she had felt so isolated and kind of like,
no one talks about
when she started talking about it.
Exactly.
How many people had miscarriages.
Exactly.
And it made her, which I think is the important, again, another why when we tell our stories, it makes us feel less alone, because you were feeling isolated, you were feeling singular, and like, what's going on? And I'm sure that there were cosmic proportions. I'm sure there were, I'm sure you went through so many layers of like, what did we do? What did I do? What did you do? What happened? Like all of that stuff that we do to ourselves when bad things happen.
Right.
Don't go according to plan, but wow.
Well, thank you for speaking up, because it is true. I was reading the comments just now, going down while y'all were talking, and people were saying, thank you so much. Nobody really talks about miscarriages that often. And like Chris just said, having had 2, feeling so alone, feeling like it's something, it was just happening to me, and realizing as I began talking about it with friends, how many people actually had miscarriages.
Right. And
not that you want everybody to have miscarriages to know how you feel, but you don't feel all alone all of a sudden, and you realize there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that they eventually did have babies, or things did work out. And I imagine, had I not had the miscarriages that I had, I know one day I'll meet those little boys or girls in heaven. But I got to have Jude, and I probably wouldn't have had my last child. It would have been a different child, a wonderful child, but
right.
I can't imagine life without Jude. So God does have a plan, and but it's nice when you have people that share their heartache, and so thank you for doing that.
Of course. Yeah. And then we just found out, to throw it in because I'm excited, but we just found out we're pregnant with baby number 5. And
my goodness.
I know, right? And we didn't have to do all the medical crazy stuff that we had to do for the other 4. So we prayed a little too hard for our families when we weren't having it happen, but we're really excited now.
That's awesome.
And again, not in our timing, all in God's timing. That's all that kind of get us through.
That's amazing. What a happy way to end the show. It really is. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you. But everybody had beautiful stories. So I just want to again say thank you to everybody for sharing, and just love having this.
And look, it's all quiet in your home now.
My husband was finally able to round them all up and get
he was like, I'm watching a basketball game.
Away from
what's going on? Why are you
basketball? You're hilarious. We're watching Disney Channel.
Okay. Well, turn it to Mystery 101.
Oh, it's recording. It's recording for sure.
It's on right now. I should probably not occupy my own audience's time. Allie, thank you for sharing. All right. Good to see you. Bye. All right, everybody. That's it. That's it for the Polaha Chautauqua. That's it for this week's episode. Go ahead and turn it on to Hallmark Movies and Mysteries and check out Killer Timing. It's actually a pretty good episode of the Mystery 101 franchise. I think you guys will like it. And next week, I'm going to talk to Sarah Drake, and we're going to talk about Her Arts in Action, and we're going to have some exciting news about what we're doing for our charity this year and who is going to donate artwork, and it's going to be awesome. So until then, bye-bye. Lord Jesus, I lift up these people to you and pray that you just capture their hearts, be alive in their lives. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Bye-bye.